Dr. Karen Johnson-Weiner is a distinguished service professor of anthropology at SUNY Potsdam, where she taught courses in linguistic anthropology. Dr. Johnson-Weiner has spent nearly 40 years exploring Amish life, language, faith, and culture. She is the author of several books on the subject, including Train Up a Child, The Old Order Amish and Mennonite Schools, New York Amish, Life in the Plain Communities of the Empire State, The Amish, and her most recent book, which will be the feature of this talk, The Lives of Amish Women. So we do have 2 of those books available for purchase after the talk if you'd like. They're on the table over here. We also have a little pop-up exhibit of some items that Karen has generously loaned us, as well as some things from our own collection, which you can see kind of around the room on the little tables here. So we will get started. So Dr. Karen Johnson-Weiner.
Thank you for coming out on what's a gorgeous day. And I'm really shocked that you're not all home in your gardens, but thank you. Before I start, these are 2 Amish kitchens. And I want to point out that that's an Amish kitchen. And you'll note the refrigerator, freezer, granite countertop. I mean, I could take decorating hints when I was visiting this family. This is what you'd probably expect. This is an Amish kitchen included. There are different kinds of Amish, and I'll talk about it a little more, but the Amish are a very diverse group. There are about 2,400 church communities, and I'll use that term throughout my talk. The church community is roughly the equivalent of a congregation. Those are the people who meet together for worship. So a church community is a congregation. Each congregation is independent and basically sets the rules, their ordinum, the discipline of the church, for themselves, which means there are roughly 2,400 different ways of being Amish. So right away, I want to emphasize the diversity. This picture sort of does it. This picture is from Pennsylvania. So you see these same kinds of Amish in New York State. The counterpart to this yellow top buggy, you'll see around Bombay with brown buggies. Some of you may have noticed the brown buggies in the Bombay area. This is black buggy, typical of Old Order Amish. You'll see that in Burke or Norfolk. This white topped buggy, you'd find that downstate in the Mohawk Valley. So all of those are equally Amish. They're differently Amish. All right, so I want to start by talking about an Amish woman whose writings I encountered just by chance. A 1903 article in which an anonymous Lancaster County Amish woman wrote, Arlene, how do I get the next slide? I should confess that I am very comfortable with the level of technology shown by the Schwartz and Sugar Amish. I can do that. Sorry about that. You have no idea how often we fussed with this. There we go. Thank you. Now, yes. She wrote in 1903, I arose at daylight yesterday morning, as I have been doing every morning during the spring and summer months since my marriage, more than 10 years ago. She added that after packing lunches and sending her 3 oldest children off to school, her youngest daughter, little Annie, was left to keep me company while she went about her housework. This woman recognized that her life was a traditional one. And she noted the ways of our community are slowly changing, but, she said complacently, the manners and habits of our people will always be different from those who are not of the faith. She was right. Her life, as she described it over a century ago, is in many respects not all that different from the lives of many contemporary Amish women. They remain committed to a particular ideal of what it means to be an Amish woman in their different church communities. And again, as I said, that's the congregation. So what I'm going to suggest is that Amish women will share an ideal, but that gets interpreted a bit differently across the spectrum of Amish life. Across the spectrum of Amish life, Amish women hope to marry and raise families within the church. As baptized church members, they find their religious identity in giving up egocentric needs and committing themselves to family and community in order to live lives that they hope will make them worthy of salvation. Amish women are there for each other, everyone contributing to the viability of the church community. They expect to help their husbands. Indeed, the prayer covering every Amish woman wears indicates that she accepts the position in which God has placed her as her husband's helpmeet. Asked what she wanted for her two daughters, one old order Amish mother told me, simply, I want them to be totally given up to their husbands and submissive, as long as the husbands are acting according to Scripture. So it's not to become slaves. They'll do what they should do as long as the husband does what he should do. Finally, Amish women expect to contribute to the spiritual, social, and economic health of the household, and by extension, the church community. Nevertheless, the ideal of Amish womanhood, grounded in faith and the ordnung or the rules of the congregation, has generally remained constant. The reality, however, is that the choices many Amish women have faced have become more varied and complex. As Amish communities have adopted and adapted technology and moved further from their agrarian roots, Amish women, like Amish men, have had to learn new ways. New technology and changing economic relationships between the non-Amish and the Amish worlds have challenged the social bonds that used to unite generations and used to bring neighbors together in mutually supported labor exchanges. While the goals have remained constant, the goal of being an Amish woman has remained constant, meeting that goal has become far more complicated. The continuities are evident in how Amish women portray their lives. In 1903, that unknown Lancaster County Amish woman described an equal division of labor and responsibility. You get both. An equal division of labor and responsibility between Amish men and women. The women, she noted, keep the house and the men work the farms. And as soon as the children are able to work, they are put at some useful employment. 50 years later, I'm going to fix that for me.
Yes, I'm going to see if I can. Pardon me.
Don't read the ones that are in the little slide. Those are things to come. 50 years after that anonymous Amish woman, John Hostetler wrote in a book called Amish Society. You have a small little book about the Amish over on display.
Over here.
Over there.
I thought you were here.
No, over there. John Hostetler wrote in Amish Society that the Amish woman's sphere and work are at home, not in the factory or in a paid profession. And think about that. Cooking, sewing, gardening, cleaning, whitewashing fences, tending to chickens, and helping with the milking keep her occupied. Caring for the children is, of course, her principal work. I will comment that John Hostetler actually grew up Amish. And the world he's describing probably never existed exactly the way he described it. Even though more contemporary Amish women will echo his sentiments. A 21st century Hewlton area Schwarzenegger Amish woman agreed, writing to a friend, one young mother of 8, noted happily, "We are having nice spring days. And the air is warmer again, makes me planting fever." Adding she had already done some baking this morning, made cheese, now I want to quilt today. Another wrote, "It's Tuesday morning after breakfast. I got a big batch of cottage cheese draining. The girls are doing dishes. Then they have to sweep floors, etc. The garden needs to be weeded, so I hope to have some of that done today while the ground is wet." In a short note written by a little girl who had just finished 3rd grade, she described how her school had enjoyed a yummy lunch at the end of the term with ice cream, and then added, "I have to help mom and play with Rachel, her infant sister." So women are describing a life in which they're occupied with home, they're doing housework, they're taking care of kids, children are growing up helping mom. And it's much the way John Hostler and that 1903 Lancaster Amish woman said. Even in the most progressive Amish communities, women talk of activities common to their counterparts in earlier times: gardening, homemaking, and child rearing. For example, author Lena Yoder, writing about her life in the large northern Indiana Amish community near Shipshewana, tells of sewing, cleaning, canning, and helping her husband milk cows. She writes that every year the children can help more and the responsibilities change. Similarly, ask about the differences between her life when she was 20 and her 20-year-old daughter's life. One Lancaster Amish mother said she doesn't see many differences. She expects her daughter's married life to be much like her own, and says her own is much like her own mother's was. "We do a lot of canning or freezing. In summer, that's about all I do," she said. Adding that she cans fruit and vegetables as well as meat, she noted simply, "I do about the same amount as mom did." Asked how her community had changed over the years, another Lancaster Amish woman told me, "Actually, it hasn't changed very much." I'll challenge. But the world is changing, and the Amish response, shaped by tradition and the ordinum, the rules of their own particular church community, the Amish world has embraced tools and activities that would have been unthinkable in Amish homes of 50 or 100 years ago. In 1903, the Amish world was only a fraction of its current size. 34 settlements in 13 states, with over 6,000 Amish and the settlement in Ontario. Today, there are nearly 400,000 Amish spread across 32 states, and over 6,000 Amish in Ontario, New Brunswick, Manitoba, and Prince Edward Island. There are 2 Amish settlements in Bolivia. So the Amish world is changing, growing. Remember what I said about each church community setting its own rules. So imagine 400,000 in the US, 6,000 in Canada, and those 2 Bolivian settlements, each with their own ways of doing things. 50 years ago, farming was still the Amish way of life. But even then, with the Amish population growing and affordable land for farming becoming more limited, some were already searching for employment off the farm. Now, in the 21st century, although the small, low-tech, labor-intensive family farm has remained the primary source of income in the most conservative communities, such as those in St. Lawrence County, other settlements have shifted from farming to entrepreneurship to wage labor. If any of you have an RV, it was likely built in a Midwestern factory with Amish people doing the building. All right. Today, fewer than 50% of the Amish claim farming as a primary occupation, and settlements no longer devoted to agriculture are accommodating more and more families in the same geographic area. So you've got a growing population density, Amish families no longer putting all their effort into farming, people starting businesses, people going to work for wage labor. Faced with a booming population, a lack of available and affordable farmland, a changing market, the Amish have had to make difficult choices. Some groups, regarding the small family farm and the shared labor of family and neighbors as essential to the religious and social health of the church community, have tried to limit technological innovation, choosing instead to move to regions like ours, where cheap available farmland allows them to continue a pre-industrial agrarian lifestyle. Some of you may have noticed people moving out of our region. It's getting harder to find farms. So you move to areas like Maine, where you're more likely to find cheap, affordable land. Other Amish groups, however, have innovated technologically, allowing Amish church members to establish larger manufacturing enterprises or permitting them to work for wages outside the family home for Amish or even non-Amish employers. Nowadays, as groups have begun redrawing the boundaries between their church communities and mainstream society, they are redefining in community-specific ways what it means to be Amish. Women, like men, have been challenged to maintain their religiously and socially defined roles. Many Amish women no longer find their daily lives filled with housekeeping chores. For example, preserving food is still the traditional task of the housewife in communities across the Amish spectrum. But those in more progressive communities who are able to stick stuff in that refrigerator freezer have access to a labor-saving technology that enables one woman to do the work of several. Other chores, too, have become less onerous. As a result, many women are able to take on other activities outside the home. Although asserting that her work was to keep the house clean and do the laundry, as one Lancaster Amish woman put it, "That's my job," she goes at least once a week with her husband to work at their deli stand in a farmer's market some distance from the family home. Her sister-in-law, a minister's wife with a part-time job, added simply, "It's no longer a full-time job to keep the house." Her own grandmother, she noted, wouldn't have dreamed of working away. It took her all day to do things like washing clothes. With appliances such as a diesel-powered automatic washer, the woman gets such chores done far more quickly. In many Amish church communities, life has become much more individual, with community members acting alone or in much smaller groups to accomplish tasks that used to require many hands. They even turn to others to purchase what they would have grown, manufactured, or done without in the past. One woman, talking about the Iowa community in which her daughter-in-law had grown up, commented that a lot of families out there don't even have a garden. They get their things from produce growers. Girls in Iowa aren't taught 5 cents worth about gardening. She did think her daughter-in-law was learning, but even in 1903, women didn't do all the sewing for the family. That anonymous Amish author noted that she, quote, "wickedly rejoiced that men buy their clothes from firms in the West, specifically designated by the elders for that purpose." Today, while their ultra-conservative Schwarzenchuber counterparts, as in Huvelton, Rensselaer Falls, east of Potsdam, still make almost everything they wear, including caps, underwear, and straw hats. In Lancaster and other more progressive church communities, housewives can find men's shirts at Costco and buy other necessities, including caps and bonnets, at Amish retail establishments, such as this one, which is huge. It's owned by an Amish woman and her daughter in northern Pennsylvania. And you can see you can buy bonnets, you can buy straw hats, you can buy coats. Who needs to sew? Years ago, commented one Lancaster woman, people would have done their own things, but nowadays people ask others. A cash for product exchange replacing housewife labor. As communities have moved away from their agrarian base, families no longer come together for harvest. In the last couple of weeks, schools in the Hubleton area have taken sort of a week off so that families can get together for husking vacation. It doesn't happen anymore. If you're not agrarian, you don't have that kind of joint labor between families. Children no longer work with parents and grandparents to learn the skills that maintained their communities for generations because those skills are no longer relevant. One Lancaster woman noted that a neighboring dairy farmer's wife, quote, has her husband home for 3 meals a day and helps him with chores. She's too busy keeping her husband fed and helping with chores to have an outside job. But another noted, farmers today don't farm like they did 20 years ago. Instead of sharing labor with neighboring farmers, as would have been done in previous generations, she noted that farmers, including her own brother-in-law, get non-Amish custom harvesters who arrive with big equipment to do the harvest because there's no one around to help. This shift from shared activity to individual activity affects even the most personal relationships. Families don't socialize in the same way, one Lancaster father told me. Another Lancaster woman noted simply that family life just evolved with the changes, adding, now we have our family time with vacation. We don't socialize with chores, but we make it a point to have family day. Then she lamented the fact that such family days were increasingly difficult to schedule as the children got older. Those teenagers, they just don't like the vacation with the family. With more free time, women in more progressive communities often turn to part-time work or establish cottage businesses. One Lancaster Amish businesswoman asserted that most Amish women have jobs, have a business at home, or work in shops. Another noted that many women had a source of income on the side, generally something that balanced well with chores at home, such as making sunbonnets or tailoring. It's not necessarily something new, she added. It's that there are more opportunities to do sewing, baking, or craft work. These are advertisements for Amish women's businesses. Often characterized as family-owned or jointly owned with their husbands, even when the husband is not involved at all, Amish women's businesses are generally seen as supplementing the husband's income, thus maintaining the woman's status as helpmeet to her husband. For example, one Lancaster County Amish woman noted that she had baked for the first 3 years of her marriage, just a roadside stand for something to do. Similarly, an Amish flower shop owner here in Lancaster County began her business with a craft stand while her husband worked away from home as a carpenter. My mother owned a quilt shop for years after they quit farming, she noted. So it was nothing new for me. Since she and her husband never had children, her goal in starting her shop was to have something to do, to have a life, to pay bills. This is an ad for, you can go into Amish homes and have a family style meal with, 20, 25 complete strangers. And it's cooked by the Amish woman. This particular woman called it a business jointly owned by her husband and her, though, as far as I could tell, all the husband did was come and eat the dinner. So, maintaining their identity as keepers at home, even when working full-time at non-housewifely chores, Amish women generally locate their businesses close to home, often operating out of the house or in an outbuilding on the farm. For example, one of the first Amish women to open a quilt shop in Lancaster County noted that, when I wanted to start my business, the bishop, who was my uncle, said that I could have this business as long as I had it in the home. I could not open a shop elsewhere. The church wanted their women to be at home. And now I'm glad that's the way it worked out. That way I was here when the children were small. A home business. Furthermore, Amish women generally start, own, and operate businesses that are extensions of their traditional roles as homemakers. As one older woman said, that's what they'd be familiar with. Wives and mothers bake, sew, clean, garden, and read to their children. Women entrepreneurs are likely to own quilt shops, greenhouses, fabric stores, and bookshops. In more progressive communities, some women make caps, bonnets, and other clothing to sell. And you may remember the slide with the woman's store with all those bonnets there. A lot of women will have greenhouses and start bedding plants to sell, said one Amish woman. Another, who offers Amish suppers to as many as 25 tourists, as I noted, says, it's something I can do at home and I don't have to go out. Increasingly, as church community ordinances have permitted men to work off the farm in manufacturing or wage labor, the result has been higher incomes for families, more free time for everybody, and fewer opportunities to keep children busy. If you go to an Amish farm up here, little kids are doing a lot of the work. They're helping dad, they're helping grandma and grandpa, they're learning to do the dishes, they're watching other kids. How do you teach children those skills if dad's at an RV factory or if mom's running a quilt store? Businesses have begun to replace those chores done on the farm. Amish women's businesses have become an extension of their mothering responsibility to teach children to work hard and be responsible to others in the family and community. A greenhouse owner in Lancaster County noted she started her business because she needed something to keep her children busy, since they didn't live on a farm. This quilt shop owner here hires her grandchildren to help package quilt pieces. And another quilt shop owner, whose youngest child is 18, employs the neighbors' daughters, especially on days when she expects tour buses to stop. The woman offering Amish suppers worked with her own daughters and her granddaughters. In other words, working with children makes the business just another way for women to meet traditional responsibilities. As one Amish woman put it, if I had to go away, leaving the children, I wouldn't want that. Similarly, a New York Amish woman, actually in Norfolk, started a small business butchering chickens for local non-Amish farmers and noted that this work allowed her to be a stay-at-home mom, not a working mother. As she put it, in the home, we can all help. If you have a family, it's better to incorporate them into the business. Otherwise, you put the business a little bit above your family. Seeing the business as helping her to teach her children to work hard, she assigns each one a particular responsibility, and the children thus learn that if they don't do their assigned tasks, all will suffer. An important lesson for future church members. As Amish women have found new ways to fulfill traditional roles, widows and single women have also been able to acquire a measure of financial stability, ensuring that they won't be a burden to others. At the same time, such entrepreneurial activity allows them to contribute to family and community by providing employment to others. For example, supporting herself and her aging mother, one woman who had cleaned houses as a teenager started a house cleaning business in her southwestern Michigan community. That enabled her to set her own hours and work near her home. Her clientele was non-Amish, and as her reputation spread, she was asked to take on other kinds of cleaning. By her early 30s, she employed several young Amish girls who helped her clean 3 large automobile dealerships. The business kept her busy, helped cover her mother's medical bills, and enabled her to play a mothering role, even though she was childless. As changes in the church community give them more free time and greater income-generating possibilities, women have basically taken their traditional skills and put them to work for a paying audience. They have also continued to meet the social needs of the church community, providing new ways of teaching children Amish values, supporting those who might otherwise be a burden, and providing otherwise hard-to-find services for fellow church members. However, the downside, in adapting traditional roles to meet a brave new world, women in more progressive Amish church communities must make choices their more conservative counterparts can't imagine. Confronting the same pressures as men to make use of new technology, each woman has to determine where, within the guidelines of the church, to draw the line. This herb shop owner notes, for example, that she's not using the internet and doesn't want to be. Why start on something the church wants to stay away from, she asked me. Similarly, a flower shop owner who buys electricity for her shop from a neighbor who's connected to the grid asserts that her church doesn't say as much anymore about the electric, perhaps in part because a lot of folks have battery packs and solar. She has a phone in her shop and advertises on the Village, the Intercourse, Pennsylvania website. Yet, like this herb shop owner, she's drawn the line at having her own internet presence, noting that she can't take online orders and all her business is done face-to-face. The trick is to keep your business somehow within church guidelines. Now, if you have cell phones, you can go online and look this shop up. They have an international internet presence. The woman who runs it inherited her popcorn business from her mother, and she noted that she felt bad because her use of electricity and computers is not the way the church would want it. I conducted several interviews with the woman who owns this. We were in the basement of her home, which was connected to the grid. She was on the computer while her 2-year-old played. And the shop was all in the basement, electric lights. You would not know you were in an Amish business unless you went upstairs, in which it was all, non-electric. It's not the way the church wanted, she acknowledged, and she's concerned that if it gets too much, then someone will fuss. Her business has grown in recent years. She risks outgrowing the space she's got in her basement. And she worries. She remembers that her mother was popping corn by hand when she started. She had a machine, and when it broke down, she just popped by hand. Also, Mom didn't do a lot of packaging to resell. We started packaging for wholesale, gift items, and then the website, acknowledging that if her business gets much larger, it might have to move to another location. And if it moves off-site, my husband will have to take charge. I couldn't manage home and children and the business. Now, I know her husband has a construction business, so it probably won't move. It remains to be seen what the limits are and how much women can adapt their traditional roles to take on business and social ventures in the larger world. Yet as different Amish churches make an uneasy peace with technology and computers and smartphones intrude, even in plain circles, it's becoming more common at least in the most progressive communities, for young Amish women and men to seek additional training, more than 8 years of school. In Holmes County, Ohio, for example, a growing number of Amish young people, many of whom attend public school, are quite familiar with computers and even use them in their work. One young woman who regularly used the computer to track inventory as part of her work at a shop in Berlin, Ohio, noted how much she loved her job, adding she wouldn't have gotten it if she hadn't already known how to use the computer. A Lancaster Amish man commented on this shift in his community from farming to business and asserted that life had become a lot more complicated and that making choices excludes other choices. With farming, he said, we had a couple hundred years of tradition that no longer applies. Those with businesses realize there are exceptions and learn how to bend the rules. Someone in business knows how to get what he wants, and eventually that seeps into the church and spirituality. It's difficult to draw the line once an innovation begins to be accepted. For example, he suggested that someone who needed to replace a well pump might well install one that's solar powered. Now, solar power has an iffy place in many progressive Amish communities. As this guy put it, it's widely accepted to charge carriage batteries with solar power, but not so much to run washing machines and well pumps with it. Growing wealth and growing wealth disparity, because not everybody starts a business. Some people go to work for a business. Growing wealth disparity add another complication. As this fellow put it, a member of the lower economic class wonders why pay $12,000 to install solar power when he could hook up to the grid and pay $30 a month. Cheaper costs and reliability make the grid more tempting. What are we going to do? A Lancaster Amish businesswoman seemed to agree with them, talking about her decision to accept credit cards in her quilt shop, which required her to install a system that runs with batteries and solar power. She said simply, that's what it means to have a business. Everything changes. The English world may have, English meaning non-Amish, the English world may have advanced faster than we did, but we're right on the back. Those in conservative Amish communities are unwilling to ride along or advance any further than they have to. And so they have rejected much of the technology that now troubles more progressive Amish. As a result, they don't have gas refrigerators and freezers. They don't have electric mixers. They don't have irons that heat themselves. There are a couple sad irons on display in the back. Ironing is a chore. I mean, it's a chore, I think, period. But if you're hefting one of those sad irons, you got to have muscles. As a result, women in those communities have little time to contemplate leisure activities or to work outside the home, and they have no desire to do so. For example, after making egg noodles with her sisters, an all-day job that involved mixing and rolling dough, cutting noodles and drying them. And I should note that for those of you who've raised chickens, making egg noodles comes after you butcher the chickens and you have eggs that are the result that are there after you butcher. So they've just finished butchering their chickens. They've been canning chickens. Now they're making egg noodles, which requires mixing and rolling dough, cutting the noodles, drying them. One Schwarzentreuber woman looked at the finished product and thought about the notion of a mechanical noodle maker. She agreed that such a machine might be interesting as a time saver, but then she added, what would we girls do? Save time for what? Unlike their more progressive counterpart, conservative Amish women remain active participants in the labor exchanges that bring neighbors and extended family members together in regular face-to-face interaction. whether it's to ready the home for church, help feed visiting agricultural workers during threshing season, for example, make potato chips, or can produce. All these pictures were taken just outside Hewelton, potato chip making day, which I love. Nevertheless, even the most conservative Amish are a bit challenged by technological creep. Their response has been to emphasize the importance of small family farms to the health of the community and to the raising of children in the Amish faith. For example, a North Country Schwarzenegger man characterized farming as a good way to keep the boys out of trouble. And I can be at home with my work. I want my boys to grow up to be farmers. As a mother in the same community put it, it's easier to teach children on a farm. Her daughter-in-law agreed, adding, I like that the whole family is together working. This has meant, in turn, reinforcing the traditional roles and responsibilities. Women take on the tasks of the household while men are occupied in the field, and the children help whichever parent needs it. Given the technologically primitive state of house and barn, young wives usually perform the same tasks as their mothers and grandmothers did in the same way. Describing how she and another sister had helped their brother-in-law, a widower, to butcher 3 pigs and 2 cows and to can the meat afterwards, one woman noted that they had kettles going on the wood stove in the kitchen, as well as 2 canners, a pressure cooking, and the big boiler in the wash house. Yet she was sad that her older nieces had not been kept home from school to help, adding that the young girls will never learn it that way. How will they learn to do it when they have their own families? Now, implicit in that comment is the notion that her nieces will always do the butchering and the canning in the same way as it was done now, exactly as this woman and her sisters did when they were little girls at home with their parents. Like their more progressive counterparts, women contribute to the economic strength of the community by raising produce for sale or through the production of crafts such as quilts. Single women, childless married women, women whose children are grown, and widows are more likely to establish businesses than married women with small children. But when they do so, it's always in their homes on their property. And as it does in more progressive communities, women's work benefits family and the church community. For example, until she became ill, one married but childless woman gave treatments, and by treatment, read massage, to others in the community. Her skill at helping others feel better, providing a great service to fellow church members. When she recovered from her own illness, she began to devote much of her attention to making salves and teas to sell to others in the settlement, healing arts that she learned from an Amish midwife in Wisconsin. She also runs a quilt shop, and you may flash back to that earlier slide of an Amish woman's quilt shop. She runs a quilt shop which is located in the spare bedroom of her house. There with her husband, who also manages the farm, she sells a variety of quilts to passersby and provides quilt tops to others in her community who might need them for events. Only recently, she gave 3 quilt tops to an Amish woman who was having a barn raising at her home. And the women all would sit around and quilt the tops. My mother was a quilter, she told me. I always enjoyed it. That was always my dream. When I'm on my own, I want to do quilts. After marrying, I got some fabric. I got my dream, she said. Yet it was a dream with very strict limits. Because of her community's ordinance, she will never have a phone, much less take credit cards or welcome tourist buses. To buy something from this shop, you have to knock on her door and hope she's home. She often closes the shop to help out others in the community. We don't like to change, one local Schwarzenegger minister told me. When you change, that's when you get into trouble. Talking together while their children played, two Schwarzenegger mothers, who were both mending clothes, agreed that their lifestyle was much the same as that of their parents and grandparents. As one put it, you don't bring things into the house that mother and dad wouldn't have approved of. But that doesn't mean their life isn't changing. Even when activities and appliances reflect past generations, expectations are different. The Schwarzenegger mother, who's seen all 12 of her children marry and half of them move to new states to be able to buy farms, she said, we really wouldn't say we've changed a lot because we keep our religion. But she says easy money to be made by working outside the community is causing her to fear for the future. Nowadays, young Schwarzenegger men can earn more at carpentry work, and the prices Schwarzenegger men and women can command for items they produce, including lumber, furniture, sheds, quilts, and baskets, have climbed. Since labor is provided by family members, all working together, this means more disposable income, and as a result, more temptation. The mother, this particular mother who fears for the future, lived with her husband and growing family in a small temporary house, and you can see them as you go around the North Country. The Amish equivalent of a trailer home. They're called a skid house because they can be moved on skids. So this mother lived with her husband and her children in a skid house for a number of years until they had enough money saved to build a house. And she contrasted her early married life with that of her children, most of whom had built homes shortly after marriage. As she put it, we had a lot harder time. Now, in that, I think she echoes all of us who think kids have it easy. But as she put it, we had a lot harder time, adding, the young generation wants to start where we left off. The young guys don't have it as hard. Land prices are high, but they earn more. Even when they just get married, they have more, she added, noting that they get a lot more presents when they get married than we did, and get money in addition to presents. It's a lot different now. Even as they are Amish women in very diverse ways, even as they face pressures their counterparts decades ago did not, Amish women remain remarkably consistent in their goals. But they've taken advantage of the possibilities brought by evolving ordnungs to put traditional skills to use in new contexts. They've taken seriously their responsibilities as church members to respect the ordnung and be guided by it, even as changing ordnungs allow them to forge very new ways of meeting the social needs of family and church. Like the Lancaster Amish woman who wrote in 1903 that I, for my part, am trying to rear the children in the way that I was reared by my good Amish parents. They hope, in the words of a 21st century Amish woman, to be a good mother and wife. And as a Schwarzenegger woman put it, for myself, I don't think it's much different. But I will happily take questions and try and make sense of them. In some communities, you have children doing correspondence courses, doing, I know a number of Amish kids that have gotten GEDs, taking training for additional specialty things like computer training. So yes and no. Up here, you don't see kids going past 8th grade. And to expand on that, if you go through 8th grade in a Schwarzenegger school, it's not the same as going through 8th grade in a Lancaster school or a Shipshewana, Indiana school, because you're using McGuffey's readers for the first few years. You're emerging bilingual. And every Amish child is bilingual, but you're not learning a whole lot about the world around, because why would you? Rumspringa, the Amish would call it being by the young. Rumspringa is Pennsylvania Dutch for running around. And that refers to a period of time for every Amish young person, begins when they're 16 or 17, when they start getting together with their peer group for activities. And it's a very important period of time because that's when you make the two most important choices in your life, whether you're going to join church, and 90% of all Amish young people do decide to get baptized and join church. You're not a church member if you're not baptized. That's when you decide to join church. And after that, who you're going to marry. So you're by the union to basically find the spouse. And so, you're marrying someone who has exactly the same background. You can only marry someone who's from a church whose ordinance is like yours. So you'd never see a Lancaster County Amish person who's joined church there marrying a Schwarzenegger person who's joined church here. This idea that they go off to the city for a year, that they're allowed to be English. You see more of that in very progressive groups where parents work for wage labor because they're often working for wage. You get an 18-year-old kid who's working in an RV factory. It's much easier to hang out with English people. So you see a lot of that kind of behavior that gets popularized as, oh, they go off and be English. Parents don't like it. Parents don't want it. So really, up here, being with the young folk, you get together every other Sunday night, you sing German hymns and eat popcorn, and drink Tang. In Norfolk, you may play volleyball games or have picnics, things like that. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Arranged marriages.
No, there are not arranged marriages. Often, in fact, who is dating whom is a closely kept secret. Siblings close in age may know before mom and dad do. And if you're Schwarzenegger, it gets funny, and every Schwarzenegger parent can talk about their own dating experiences because they do what's called bed courtship. That is, after the hymn singing and the popcorn and the Tang, you go home with your date. And you sneak up to her bedroom, and parents make sure that every child, maybe more accurate, every girl who is in the young folk has her own bedroom. And they're there in the bedroom until the wee hours of the dawn, when the guy's supposed to somehow get out of there without waking anybody up. Now, remember, the family's getting up at 4. And everybody, I've heard these stories over and over of mom being in the kitchen, and there's this streak as someone barrels down the stairs and out the door in hopes of not getting caught. And then they get teased at work the next day, oh, wake up, had a good date, huh? So they're not arranged marriages. It's a closely kept secret. It used to be, and still is up here. You kept you're published. Your engagement is announced 2 weeks before the wedding, and that's when everybody finds out. And it used to be that way everywhere. It's much harder to keep it secret in progressive communities, simply because weddings have gotten a lot more expensive. You're cooking 2 meals for upwards of 500 people each time. You got to arrange for things, and so it's harder to keep it secret. If you leave without becoming baptized, you can come back. They really don't want you hanging out there and being a bad example to your siblings, but you haven't done anything wrong. So you'll come to visit. You marry English, you bring the grandkids home to visit. If, however, you're baptized and then you leave, baptism is a vow to God. It's a promise to God to obey the ordinance, to obey the rules, which is why changing ordinance for those progressive Amish women make life really more complicated. How do you uphold the ordinance of the church and still build a successful business? If you've promised to uphold the ordinance, no matter what, even unto death, and there's a long history of martyrdom, for Amish and Mennonite and Hutterite folks. And then you leave, you've broken a promise to God. And all the others in the church who've made that same promise, what are they going to do? Are they going to break their promise to God? No, you've removed yourself from fellowship with them. The church, the Amish don't believe you can know you're saved. There is no assurance of salvation. They're not born again. What they have is a belief that by living together, according to the Ordinum, which is their attempt to put Christ's teachings into practice, by living together in this way, they can be strong for each other and help each other lead a life that will make them worthy of salvation. So if somebody's going to violate a promise to God, even if it's your child, your parent, and you leave them around, that's like you're breaking your own promise to God. How can you live a life worthy of salvation if you break promises to God? And so in that case, the person is shunned. Depends on the church community, what all shunning entails. The more conservative you are, the more complete the shunning is. Now, what parents hope, what church members hope, is that the person who is shunned will come to their senses. It's kind of like tough love. You'll see the enormity of the decision you've made, and you'll come back, and you'll make confession to the church. And once that happens, you're back in. I know, actually, one of the people I quoted in this, a father who's got, I think he's got 10 boys and 2 daughters or something. The Amish say the lazy one gets the help. And so every time he had another son, people said, the lazy one gets the help. Left, came back, raised a family. He's had 2 brothers who left the church, came back, one is a bishop. When I first started work, I learned about Jet Mose, an Amish bishop in Ohio, who was quite well known, who'd been shunned for years after he joined the Air Force. He joined church, left, joined the Air Force, flew fighter jets, which was why, and the Amish called him Chet Mose, so I thought it was like a nickname, well, a name. And then I learned more. I was a linguist, I should have caught on earlier, that it was Jet, pronounced with an Amish accent. He came back, became a bishop, and that was that. So you can't come back. It's your choice. Everything about becoming a church member, staying a church member, being a church member is individual choice. So.
Are most of our families around here Schwarzenegger?
Yes. Yeah. You've got Schwarzenegger Amish, Hewelton, over to Black Lake, into Lafargeville. You've got Swiss Amish in the Norfolk area. It's a very small community. You've got Byler Amish around Bombay. You've got Old Order Amish in Burke area. And you've got more Byler Amish around past there, around Malone. The answer to your second question is an easy no. There was a case when the Amish first started to arrive in the North Country. One of the local churches wanted to welcome them with a buffet welcome party, and nobody came. You do occasionally see Amish people at funerals for English friends, but to just go to church, no. And the Amish will allow you to preach in their own services. I mean, I've attended Amish church, but they will allow you to preach in their own services only if you're from a fellowshipping group. That means your ordinal is the same, which rules out Methodists and Lutherans and so on. Now, the other one was converts to the Amish. There have been. And they tend to be in more progressive groups. There was a longtime historian, author of many books about the Amish, who had been destined for the Catholic priesthood until he encountered an Amish family in Indiana while selling encyclopedias. So he joined the Amish. It's hard for several reasons. Converts are looking for something. And to join a church where it's not so guaranteed. You can't know you're saved if you join an Amish church. You have this assurance, but converts are often looking for more. It's also very difficult for English people. You have to become fluent in another language. You have to give up the egocentrism that is quite prized among the English, the almighty I think, I want, because you're giving up. You're yielding to the consensus, even though you're pretty sure you know better than, Harvey Miller over there. You got to give that up. And plus you're giving up, students would say, do you ever want to be Amish? No, I like TV. I like reading all sorts of things. I like doing activities that I would have no time to do. So it becomes very hard for a non-Amish person to convert. So it certainly has happened. Many join, there's a book over there called Amish Mennonites. Many will join a church like that. And there are churches like that here in the North Country, where you're dressed plain. So you have these outward signs of being in this religious group, but you can have assurance of salvation. The language is English. You can drive cars, have electricity. In St. Lawrence County in 1973, you had two groups. And the 73 date, I'll use it for both. They say Norfolk came earlier than the Schwarzentroopers in the Hewleton area. I'm not convinced that it was an appreciably different time, but both are around 73, 74. And the Norfolk folks came from Indiana via Pennsylvania, and the Schwarzentroopers came from Holmes County, Ohio.
I always wondered what do they do with their debt? How do they deal with that? Do they go to funeral homes? Or do they take care of their own debt?
They take care of their own debt. Funeral homes will be involved because there are rules. And again, it depends on the group. Some will have funeral homes come and embalm. Others won't. The first Amish funeral I went to was terrible. It was a child in farming accident. And it was in winter, they were bringing logs out of the field and they were pulling the logs with a horse. And 12-year-old little boys, can you imagine wanting to ride on that log as it's being bumped along, being pulled by a horse? Well, he did. And the log flipped up, came down on top, crushed his skull. An Amish funeral taught me a lot because it made me realize that every child, I went up and said, as English people do, and I said something to the parents and to the grandparents. But then I realized that Amish people will come in and greet everybody, and say, because this was the loss of a future church member, a future son-in-law, future, so there was that sense. The body is laid out by older members of the church community, men if it's a man, women if it's a woman. It's put it's put in the coffin, and I'm talking about up here. This may vary in other communities. It's put in a coffin. It's built by someone in the church community. People will take time to go past the coffin. The funeral service will be preached, and at the end, everybody goes past the coffin for a final goodbye. You nail it shut, take it to the cemetery, which is on land donated by someone in the community. Later, someone in the community will make a cement headstone. Though the Norfolk people, a Swiss tradition is wooden headstones. So there are no headstones after. And that's that. There are a number of small Schwarzentrooper cemeteries around. There's one on the Blackville Road, not far, or not the Blackville Road, Bishop Road. It's not the Bishop Road, it comes into the Bishop Road. There's a little one there. You won't see it in summertime because they don't mow and keep it. But there's a big Amish cemetery in Michigan where you have professional headstones and bodies have been embalmed before being put there, where there were flowers on the grave. So it depends on the church community. Up here, you're not going to get solar because that's just not the ordinum of the Schwarzentroopers. in Lancaster County, you have Amish manufacturing solar panels. So the Amish have not only started using it, they're selling to non-Amish to use it. Farming, organic. A lot of the local farmers have picked up that they can get more value for their produce if they certify organic. So many are going in that direction. If it doesn't threaten the ordinance, if you're doing something that looks like, yeah, you're going to be making a change in lifestyle that we're not going to be happy with, then the church will come down on it. But, you know, when for a while, an example of a change, when the cheese factories, the local cheese factories, and some of you will recall there was a cheese factory in Norfolk and one in Hewelton, and they would take the grade B milk. Well, Amish were shipping only canned milk, so it couldn't be grade A. Well, the cheese factories closed. How do you create a market for the milk that you have if it can't be, you know, how do you keep young people farming? And they made a huge change in the local ordinance in that they began to allow dumping stations. I will never forget being in a bishop's house and the bishop's daughter saying, "Oh, I can't wait till they put the electricity in." And I said, I didn't expect to hear that from a bishop's daughter. I said, how, you know, I want to know, because here's this dumping station on land owned by the bishop. And they were little dumping stations were going in all over. And how do you do this? And the explanation was interesting. He said, yes, we own the land, but Agrimark owns the dumping station that happens to sit on the land. And so the electricity is going into the dumping station. We're not doing the electricity. But by permitting this, our young people can keep farming. And so they would take the canned milk. They also justified it because what this did was remove an English presence from most Amish farms, because it used to be the milk truck came to the farm, right up close to the door where all the little children were playing, blah, blah, blah. Now, it only went to the dumping station. So, you know, these kinds of little tortured logic.
So the community is more important.
The community is key. It's the church.
And it doesn't include anything else.
It doesn't, it's the Amish word for church is Gemeinde, which comes from the German word Gemeinde. They meet in each other's homes. You become a member through baptism. So all those little kids are cute, but they're not church members, which has been a factor in different court decisions. So it's, you know, the Gemeinde, the church community, is the people. And those people living together, following the ordinum, are what you hope will help you be worthy of salvation. So it's the community that's key. Not and below the community, it's families. The church will tell you how big it is by the number of families. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are Amish newspapers. The Amish newspapers are really, it's a whole newspaper of letters from different communities. And they all start out, weather's great here at church, so-and-so was in town, who has church next, and maybe a funny story that will poke fun at something, often poking fun at the writer. And so there are 2 Amish newspapers. There are a number of Amish magazines, including magazines for women. There are circle letters. Some of you may have heard of circle letters. Circle letter is often they're uniting siblings or cousins or mothers of twins or whatever. And let's say you've got 10 people. The first one writes the letter. It goes all the way around. Everybody adds their letter, and it comes back to the first one, who takes out her old letter, writes a new one, adds it, and it goes around with everybody taking the old letter out. A bishop told me once that he was down in Lancaster County, and a bishop down in Lancaster County asked, how could they contact people without phones? That he noticed the Schwarzentrooper bishop didn't have a phone. He said, don't you write letters?